Okay, so the Women's Super League is back this weekend once again for another round of fixtures. It's the second round after the international break. Then we've also got the conclusion to the Women's National League here in Ireland. To talk through a pretty busy weekend of football, Emma Carroll, our own Emma Carroll, is here. How are you getting on?
Good. Strange being on this side of the camera, to be honest.
Emma usually visual mixes outside, essentially produces from the box here. You're also involved in the COYGIG pod, which is of course our new Irish football show, our Irish women's football show. Katie McCabe was the guest last week. We're going to see her in action this Saturday, 1:30, away to Spurs, the North London derby. This is a pretty tasty fixture, to say the least. Mainly because we've all become, I guess, a little bit obsessed with this Arsenal team this season via Katie McCabe, but also because Spurs are pretty good as well.
Yeah, Arsenal obviously unbeaten and flying it so far this season. But yeah, Spurs have made a real turnaround this season compared to where they were last season. They really struggled and had a bit of a battle on their hands last season, but they're sitting in third now. So North London derby, and when you've got first against third, it's definitely going to make it a little bit more spicier, I think.
What has Spurs done differently this season?
Well, they brought in Rihanna Skinner, who's new manager, so she's definitely put more organisation into the team. They didn't seem to have a real identity last season. Alex Morgan was obviously a massive signing for them last season, but we didn't get to see much of her, so I suppose that signing probably was maybe brought in to try get them a few goals and build confidence last season, but that didn't really happen. But this season they're looking good. They're climbing the table.
Was the Morgan signing a bit of a headline grabbing one rather than one that would have legitimately given them sustainable success over a period of time?
Yeah, it was definitely that, and it was one of those last season where we saw a lot of the US stars coming in. I think COVID and stuff and their league being cancelled over there led to a lot of that, and then obviously Alex Morgan had just come back from having a baby, so I think from her point of view it was probably about getting a bit of fitness, some training in, and a little bit of game time back under her belt before moving back over. And then from Spurs, you're in the WSL and a big signing, and a bit like kind of Gareth Bale, I suppose, elevate you and gather headlines on social media.
So this is obviously then going to be a rivalry that you look at the investment that both of these teams have made over the last couple of years in particular. This rivalry is not going anywhere. This is not a one-off Arsenal Spurs kind of I guess playing it out at the top of the table. This is very much two clubs where you could see there being a few years in this where, of course, Chelsea and Manchester City will be expected to be contending year after year, but Arsenal and Spurs, Arsenal very much so, are going to be in contention most years, you'd suspect, as well.
Yeah, Arsenal are definitely pushing it, and they're definitely a higher quality, and they're definitely battling it out with the likes of Chelsea and City for titles and Champions League spots. I suppose in the men's game, the North London derby is a massive thing. In the women's game, we haven't really seen that so much. But just before COVID hit, we seen those record attendances at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as well for the women's North London derby. So there's definitely, I suppose, something building here. It's slow, but I suppose Spurs are kind of still in their infancy of turning professionals. So yeah, we're going to see the growth there, I think, definitely.
Arsenal then, 6 games played, 6 wins, 23 goals scored, 2 goals conceded. Is the magnitude of what they've done this season surprising?
Yes and no. They have players that none of us would be surprised that they're getting these results, and they made the signings like Nikita Paris, Tobin Heath, Mana Inabuchi. So really good attacking signings, but also very clever signings in someone like Manham in the midfield, and she's just allowed Kim Little to kind of move up further to the field. And as Jonas Eideveld, her manager has been saying, he just wants Kim Little to shoot, and she's doing that and she's scoring. So since retiring and having that protection behind her, she's definitely almost like a new player this season for them. And Katie McCabe has just been improving the last couple of seasons, and I suppose we're seeing her also further up the field in some stages, which is a surprise when you've got the likes of Tobin Heath after being signed. You think, okay, the battle for the attack is on. So you kind of really felt, all right, well, she's probably going to be left in that left back position, but we haven't seen that. We've seen her left forward, right wing forward as well during certain games. So these players are really stepping up a level, and although those big signings are coming in, you've got players like Beth Mead, who is probably the player of the season so far. She missed out on the Euros with the England squad, and it seemed to just make her a bit angry and up her levels over the summer. She's just incredible with the amount of goals and assists that she has so far this season. So yeah, Arsenal are definitely the one to beat so far this season.
Where do you think, when things settle down a little bit, maybe they are... Okay, so Katie McCabe didn't score last weekend, which is an absolute disaster from her perspective. When things settle down, maybe on her form, and maybe things level out as the season develops, do you think it's left back that she is going to settle in?
If you start getting Tobin Heath, Miedema, Nikita Paris, Beth Mead, Imabuchi all into the team, then for us to continue to want to see McCabe play, then left back is probably the position where there's a bit of space there, even though she has that battle with Steph Catley to keep that position. But
was Catley signed to replace her?
I think we all thought that last season when she came in. It definitely seemed that way, or maybe it was just an Irish point of view. We're worried when somebody gets signed in an Irish player's position. Yeah, you're like, oh, this is coming in to replace me. But I think Catley kind of picked up an injury quite early on last season, so McCabe managed to keep her spot and prove herself, because she ended up being Arsenal's player of the season last season. So that just goes to show, and her manager is obviously putting a lot of trust in her. He's allowing her to play further forward. He's even putting her, like when he's making substitutions and putting Catley on, he's not necessarily taking McCabe off. He's moving her to the right wing and stuff. So it's interesting to see the different positions that she's been playing in, and the more she plays, the better for Ireland. And if she gets into those attacking positions, then even better again, because maybe it might push Pau to actually put her a bit further forward, which is something we kind of seen in the last game against Finland a little bit.
Yeah, so you think that will be a positive development, you think that Pau maybe still needs convincing to put McCabe in an advanced position?
Yeah, probably, I think so. Well, that's how it would seem if she keeps putting her left back, but I suppose when you look at the international setup, is we don't probably have many options in the left back position, so you're almost trying to play Katie everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of want two Katies to be left back and a left kind of forward player as well. So
I guess the counter-attacking game that we saw against Finland in particular in the second half was just like, wow, there's acres of space in front of McCabe here. Going from left back isn't exactly the worst position for her to be in. So that's at 1:30 on Saturday. The rest of the games are on Sunday.
Yep.
So Everton United is the early game at 12:30. 2 o'clock games are Birmingham City against Aston Villa. It's like Derby weekend. Brighton against Leicester at 2 o'clock. West Ham against Reading at 3 o'clock. And we just want to touch on the next 3 o'clock game here, which is Manchester City against Chelsea. This is a heavyweight, head to head, no question about it, but it probably should be reflected more on the table. Manchester City have been really disappointing this season.
Yeah, any other season, this is kind of built up to probably be your nearly year title decider in a way. They're always good games. They always kind of go straight to the death as well. We've seen last minute equalisers and winners as well in these fixtures over the last few seasons. But Man City haven't had a great start to the season. But I suppose they have had an awful lot of injuries, like Lucy Braun, Steph Houghton, Kira Walsh, to name but a few, and they're big hitters. So when you're missing the likes of those players and that experience, then you can kind of give them a little bit of leeway. But when you look at their actual starting 11s in some of those games, you think some of the teams that they came up against, they probably still should have been doing better and grinding out results. Last weekend we seen them probably back to their best a little bit. They beat Leicester 4-1. Now Leicester are bottom of the table, so maybe you can't read too much into it, but they had the likes of Kira Walsh back in the midfield, which gives them a lot of solidity there, protecting the back four, because their back four is a bit of a mixed match of players at the moment. There's no real centre backs or right backs in that team at the moment. So having that really will hopefully give them a bit of confidence. But when you're coming up against a Chelsea team with forwards like Sam Kerr, Kirby, Harder has had a little niggle, so I'm not too sure if she'll be ready for the weekend. But even if she's not ready, you've still got Jessie Fleming, who has come into her own over the last couple of weeks. Canadian Olympian. She scored the winner against Aston Villa there on Saturday, and again in the Champions League during the week. So she's definitely kind of one to watch. And it just goes to show the depth that they have. That's even going without saying the likes of Beth England as well on the forward line. So when you've that attack coming up, this City defence, you would think that it's only going to go one way, but between City and Chelsea, you just never know. But if Chelsea play anything like the way they did in the Champions League during the week, then hopefully they're beginning to find their top gear again.
Right, okay. So you've got Beth England, Jessie Fleming, both started obviously last weekend against Villa in the game you mentioned. You got Kirby and Kerr coming off the bench.
Yeah.
Not all four of them can start, or can they?
No, they probably won't start. No, they probably won't all start together. Beth England, we've seen her being on the bench a lot, but coming off and scoring goals and scoring for England as well. So she's starting to find form. 2 seasons ago, she was the top goal scorer in the WSL, player of the season as well. So it just goes to show, when you've got Kirby, Kerr and Harder, and then the likes of Fleming and England coming in behind them, then it's just such an exciting attack to watch.
7-0 was the scoreline against Servette the other night in the Champions League.
Yeah.
Is there a slight concern? Like, are they like a little bit like Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, where you're kind of obviously clutching at straws when you're looking for a weakness, but they do tend to rack up insane stats, like 76% possession against Villa last weekend, 16 shots, 1-0. Like, I mean, the sense that they should be beating teams by a bigger margin but aren't.
The Villa game, you definitely would have thought so. They probably didn't put in their best performance. It wasn't really the Chelsea we've seen. But then
they won 7-0
about it on the COYGIG podcast on Tuesday, and then they go and put in that Champions League performance. So it was like, actually, no, we're still here. Aston Villa probably put in just a really good defensive performance as well. In fairness to them, they done a lot of work to keep them at bay, and Chelsea done that without starting the likes of your Kirby Harders. So
yeah, well, they had less possession against Servette and then ended up scoring 6 more goals against Servette. So really, possession is not 9/10 of the law, as they say. So let's move on and quickly wrap up through some of the other games this weekend. Everton versus United is fascinating, not least because of Everton's new manager.
Yeah, Everton have, when we talk about City's poor performance at the start of the season, Everton has even been lower than that, and their goal at the start of the season definitely would have been to push for that Champions League spot. They've sacked their manager, Willie Kirk, even after making 8 or 9 signings in the window in the summer, so you're probably thinking after 5 games maybe it's a bit too soon. That team hasn't fully bedded in, but Everton has said, no, we're going for a new manager. They've gone for Jean-Luc Vasseur, the ex-Lyon manager, who has pretty much won everything there is. Champions League, the French league title. Lyon, as we know, have dominated Europe for years and years, and one season where PSG kind of pipped him, he was shown the door, which was last season. So he's in at Everton now. Everton are obviously putting a lot of backing into their women's team if this is the route they're taking. So it will probably be a bit of a project, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there, because when you're bringing in a winner like that, then there's only one way you can be thinking.
This is a coup for Everton.
I would think so, and it's exciting to see that. Willie Kirk put in a lot of effort to get Everton back up the table to where they were, so maybe they were a bit harsh to let him go early, but maybe it's just shining a light on how much the WSL is growing. If they're starting to take, like we see this in the men's game all the time, the likes of Aston Villa and Norwich sacking their manager after a couple of games in a season. To see this happening in the WSL is probably a bit of a new thing. To see this kind of knee-jerk reaction, so it's shown that they're mean business, and now there's more pressure on the players and the managers. Yeah,
like I guess it probably shows the value that these teams place on those European spots, because like Everton are third from bottom but still very much in the hunt. Like, you know, it's United, who they play this weekend, are in 5th, and there's only a 5-point gap between them. Granted, we're only 6 games into the season, but those patterns haven't exactly set in just yet, so you can afford to sack your manager and think you can have a significant change on the destination of your campaign.
Yeah, they've made the decision early, I suppose, to kind of in the hope that will happen. Manchester United are the same, similar to Everton. They would be hoping that they would be pushing for that 3rd spot, but when you look at the league, and Spurs and Brighton in particular are actually probably the little bits of the shock so far. Surprises this season. Yeah, they're flying it and really putting the pressure on the likes of Manchester United and Everton to prove themselves.
So Everton versus United, as I say, is 12:30 kick-off on Sunday. Man City against Chelsea is 3 o'clock on Sunday, and then Spurs against Arsenal is the 1:30 game on Saturday. So those are the 3 big games this weekend in the WSL. Just want to touch on the Women's National League here before we wrap up. It is match day 27. It is the final day of the season. Peamount obviously drew 0-0 with UCD last Saturday, 0-0 scoreline, which scuppered their title celebrations. There's a 2-point gap between them now and Shells. Shells are at home to Wexford Youths. Peamount are at home to Galway. Slight bit of pressure, to say the least, on Peamount to make sure they do get the job done this weekend.
Yeah, surprisingly, Karen Duggan didn't really want to talk about it on the podcast last week. Yeah, they would have been probably hoping that they would have got the job done last week. So they go into the final game of the season now, 2 points clear of Shells, but Shelbourne probably have the tougher fixture of the two as well. Although they are at home, they're playing Wexford Youth, so they're in their third place. So a win for Shells is a must, and then I suppose wait and hope for what happens between Peamount and Galway. You would expect Peamount to do the business over Galway and take that title home again.
Yeah, they need to win and Peamount needs to lose, really, if we're talking realistically here.
Yeah, right. That's on TG Carroll as well, we should say, so you can see where the title goes live on TV, which is good.
Nice one. That's live at 7:30 on Saturday this weekend, so pretty big weekend of football both here and across the water. Emma Carroll, great stuff. Thanks a million.